Can aliens capture sovereign souls?
That's an interesting question. Well, some people believe they can. I mean, what's sovereign, right? I mean, I think sovereign, my idea of sovereign now would be somebody who's completely realized in their eternal spirit that, goes in and through maybe all incarnational experiences. So I think the more deeply lucid you are of that nature, the less likely they can entrap you. Although, I believe that they can entrap somebody as they're coming into incarnation. And then that lifetime, they're under that influence until we become lucid enough to connect to something larger than ourselves, like God, and then do whatever we can to disconnect. So, and sometimes it is like energy body work where you can see like how these entities will embed themselves in certain parts of the body. And that's what Malanga found. That's what many energy healers find, like even with implants or entities that will link in to certain chakras, for example. That's true about the whole, what Dr. Corrado Malanga seemed to find. Well, they're temporal in that they can only function in I guess the world of time and space, even though they can go in and out of time to access us, but it's as if they cannot function in the eternal now, past, present, future of unlimited energy and awareness that we have as beings connected to the Most High, that something was cut off so that they're different. So they want to keep us trapped in the temporal realm with us, or so that they live through us here. So it seems like a lot of them are trapped here, or they're trapped in that level of awareness and consciousness or something. But yeah,
maybe these beings aren't actually what a lot of New Agers would say are fourth dimensional and higher beings. Maybe they're actually stuck in our 3D reality somehow, just beyond the veil of our visual perception. Within our what our eyes can see, which is less than 1% of the visible radiation field. Maybe they're stuck within this 3D reality. They're just in a different room in the house, but the house is this 3D reality, and they want to ascend to other actual dimensions.
Yeah, well, they would, but to piggyback on us, probably.
Yes.
Yeah, I just think many of them are stuck here, and that Earth is actually a repository for a lot of the dark beings who I think were stuck in like Tartaros and the Sheol and some of the deeper, darker realms that are within the earth. And that's what I think. But and certainly, though, that they need technology. And I think that they're using technology to facilitate entrance and hacking into us. It's almost like they need that to read us, kind of like, yeah, and influence us more clearly. And I think, yeah, the whole transhumanism thing is like a immortality for the ones who've disconnected from the real spirit, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why they would want it so bad. And yeah, I mean, they're always looking for bodies. So there's the other thing about one of the things that Malanga said is that they had a shortage of bodies of even their own. And so that's why they would, put he called it their active alien memory I don't know, it's like a hard drive consciousness in us, because they didn't have a body to put it in. And then they lived through us as hosts, almost like like an implant, and cause a discoherence between our spirits so that they live their agenda and their identity through us. So a lot of times people, I think they'll have this alien identity thing going on, where one needs to ask the question, is this a real identity of ours? Or is this the identity that's basically piggybacking through us, that may have many lives or many memories of other systems, but is it really us? So that's something that needs to be distinguished, because I think that's what they would do. They were looking for bodies. They didn't have enough bodies. And then the other thing that Malanga found that I thought was interesting, although many clairvoyants maybe could perceive this, that some came from what he called, some were from like our universe, for example, and what he called the lux being, which was a type of light that would manifest as this moving light thingy, for lack of a better term, and it could move in and out of the body and have a consciousness that would act like it was our spirit guide. And it was difficult to get rid of. But it was something that was from our own universe, and he called it the lux being that was connected to the whole Lucifer energy. and consciousness. And then there was other beings that appeared like black dots or shadows that he claimed came from kind of like another universe or a bidimensional universe. And then when these black dots or shadows took on a astral form or appearance, they could appear like, I don't know if he called it the six-fingered Grinch or the Nordic cyborg types, where they would actually take on a form in the astral realm, but in reality, they were nothing more than a black dot or shadow. And so they had like a darker energy, but they weren't like the looks being, but they all acted like some kind of attached entity that would operate through us, but they could take on different forms or different non-corporeal forms. So there'll be those who actually have a body that people have seen in abductions, like reptilians and grays, and even others that they know they're actually physical. And then others that seem to be only functioning in a astral kind of other non-corporeal form, but they still have an image.
Do you think these mental illness people that are these symptoms of mental illness, or just these people that, you know, they had these behaviors? You know, mental illness is rising. My wife can tell you that she's been a nurse for a while in the psych field, and it's getting worse year by year. And do you think it's almost like we're being attacked by something? I'm not saying all cases are from these demonic entities, but it makes you wonder if some are or not. Maybe not demonic. It could be actual interdimensional entities, aliens, whatever this phenomena is that's masquerading. And then on the flip side of the coin, I don't know if you believe in reincarnation, but if it is true, I don't know if it is true. You know, maybe one's energy is almost like burnt out from being reincarnated so much. It's coming into this bullshit, you know, to this reality, you know, and they come in this reality in this modern age, and like, whoa, what the hell's going on? You know, this world's crazy. Maybe their soul, their essence, whatever that energy is just burnt out, and it makes this more hackable, and where these things can just walk in and just take over one's psyche and subconscious, and pretty much just run and control their reality.
Yeah. And then Courtney Brown was on a show. Well, he's been on many different shows, but Courtney Brown is the one who runs the Farsight Institute for Remote Viewing. And he's been around for quite some time and has some really good like remote viewers and stuff. And he was on a show with Nathan Sizek and Rob Khalil, but talking about the reincarnation. I don't know if he called it the reincarnation soul trap of what he perceives going on with the fake, tunnel of light, and then shocking the soul after it dies and goes out of the body. And then the shock causes it to have a type of amnesia. And then immediately some council of, I don't know what he called it, a group of beings that appear to be some spirit guides saying, well, we think you need to learn this lesson, and you need to go back and learn this, that, and the other. But meanwhile, we're eternal spirits who have come in, who don't need to keep evolving. Okay, really? And it's just that we forgot because they blanked us out. That's the whole idea. And then they recycle us unnaturally. So he talked about that and many other things about like the aliens and the grays and distinguishing what's going on with a lot of different things. But it is a type of soul recycling going on. And some people are actually remembering it distinctly in terms of having their soul trapped and then recycled from an underground base, and then being given a script to carry out a certain agenda. That's part of like the false alien agenda thing. So, and there's certain programs where that's part of the programming, but it might be much more sophisticated, where they can trap a soul and then bring it into, let's say, it could be in a test tube baby or something that has been deliberately stored and captured and then put into a body that is in a deeper project of some sort. So that's some of the things that are being reported that are kind of weird, but that suggests that there's something more going on,
And maybe one of the many tricks, is that we've been told at this actually, and there is a lot of accounts of, like near death experience and things like that, the light at the end of the tunnel. And I've had people come on the show. Howdy McCoskey, I think he's one of them,
Oh, yeah.
don't go into the light. That is the trick. And maybe if there is some kind of loose farming going on, Eve, and maybe one aspect, one agenda, nefarious agenda at play is they want our energy, our soul, something with whatever makes us tick, the humanity within us, and they want us to go through that light so that our soul can be recycled, but that energy, that spark within us, or whatever you want to call it, that is loosed into the light, into whatever that ethereal, whatever that is, and they take that, and then they use that whatever nefarious means, and then we're like brought back into this damn system again, and we just hit the repeat button on the keyboard, and we do it all over again to help feed this nefarious agenda, whatever's going on,
Yeah, and that's what Courtney Brown said, that it's basically he thought it was an artificial intelligence system that was designed. Although there was also the ideas, I think, that this is changing, that I think that the system's going to be eventually dismantled, or maybe it's a time, I don't know, that maybe there will be, I don't want to call it a harvest, where some will be able to be set free from this. Actually, he calls it the trapping of the is-bees. And those who have the eternal spirit quality, there is be, he calls them is bees. So we are like is bees. And even though we are eternal in nature, we can be trapped in a realm. And so that's how he sees it, that they could trap us, they can't kill us. So what's interesting is, I'm kind of getting off thing here, but in the Ted Rice Masquerade of Angels experience, and he has actually gone on some shows on the Alien Talk channel with Stuart Eglinton, and he was actually in hiding for many years, and I didn't even know it, because he had to keep it secret, because after Carla Turner died and it was too dangerous, he was getting threatened and stuff. And of course, one of the probably the most memorable experiences in his book was the one about the cloning switching out procedure. And he describes that in the book, and I put that in the Love Bite book, along with the how he was bonded with another teenager when he was 14, with a classic, alien love bite that lasted many years, and it was a dysfunctional one too. But but the cloning thing, what was interesting is, I found that the way he described it, even later in conversation, that when they made him drink a particular fluorescent liquid in an abduction scenario with some kind of medical alien in a lab coat doing this medical procedure, which he had to drink this glowing green liquid. And then after he drank it, it made him hot. I believe he said it made him really hot, got violently ill and vomited, and then blacked out. And so after he blacked out, he actually popped out of his body that was, on the craft in this particular medical situation. And then he was able to observe out of the body the green liquid that he vomited out that was fluorescent. It was connected to the etheric body, the tendrils of the etheric body. So it was like he had an etheric body that popped out that still had the same shape as his physical body. And sometimes when you have astral out of the body experiences, you perceive your etheric double, right? But he also experienced that there was another aspect of him that was like all light, that was done nothing but pure love, that could also observe the experience, but wasn't necessarily the part that was trapped and transferred into the black box, which is another part of the cloning thing, where they actually put a black box over the body and do an electrical type of signal to the box, and then it somehow extracts the soul out of the body into the black box, and then the black box is transferred over eventually to another clone body that's like in all these drawers, like they have all these clone bodies in another upgrade, perhaps at the same age. And then the black box is put back on the body, re-electrocuted or whatever, and then it jiggles the body and awake, and then he basically finds himself back in the other body, which is a clone body. But the eternal spirit could not be trapped, but it still is linked in with him as what is his true essence. So I believe that essence can't be changed. It's always eternal, and it is what it is. It's like pure love. So I think that they can't harm that, but they can trap it. So it's still connected to your etheric double that went into basically the clone body. So I just had to say that because I believe that that's our true essence. If we can find a way to identify and remember and really tap into that quality of being as our original identity, then that gives us more power over how maybe the other parts of our consciousness in our body, like our etheric double that has our emotions and our beliefs of our personality, it won't have as much control over us, the aliens or whatever, or whoever, when we're connected more deeply with I call it the spontaneous wisdom and power and love of our original beingness. And that is which they can never copy, that they do not seem to have. So that is our power. And I believe that the more we connect with that original essence through our heart, and really it's the heart of love, like it's really simple, like the more, it's almost like the more virtuous, the more loving, even like a typical Christian, all those good qualities that we aspire to. And if we're more connected with that through our heart, then the conduit to our spirit comes more powerful in us, and that can operate in a spontaneous way that can't be calculated or predicted with artificial intelligence. And so that's, I think,
It puts up a better firewall, like a
yeah,
firewall on the computer, where it blocks
yeah,
out these negative things and these negative entities, whatever.
because they're always trying to figure us out. Like, and in this other video that I was listening to by my friend Aurora with the Promethean, she perceives like when these, when people are trying to remote view, or the magicians and the aliens or the humans, or who are like these predatory beings, they have a quality of presence and intention that they always, like in the world today, like everything's about like getting information and controlling everything about your life. They have to know all the information, everything about your medical records, what you think, how you feel, what you eat. Is like, what's this anal retentive, like obsessive compulsive need to control, knowing everything about us and how we operate, what we're doing, what we're thinking, where we're going? Like, what's wrong with them? What's wrong with them? If you have like some predator stalking you who's doing shit like that, would you know that they're mentally ill, like psychopathic? You know what I mean? So there's whole entire groups of people and who are imbued by this predatory psychopathic spirit that has to know every single thing about us, as if they're not connected to the real thing. So they have,
Almost like NPCs, non-player characters or something.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that's why they would need artificial intelligence to figure all this shit out, because they're not it. You know what I mean? So I just had to say that, because the way she described it was like, yeah, let's say once you're being gang stalked and targeted, and because you're too aware, and this actually goes into what I observe with many of my clients who come to me for different reasons. Oftentimes it's, a love bite or relationship thing, or they feel interference, or they have complex trauma from being in a project. But if they become aware to the extent that someone or something consider them dangerous because of their awareness, then oftentimes they become the target of many kinds of, gang stalking or targeting in different ways. So it really leads me to conclude that it is their awareness itself that is what they consider dangerous. Like if you were a big bad mafia boss and someone was a witness to a crime, but they really actually didn't realize it, and they're really not out to like tell, they really don't want to tell the truth about it or be a whistleblower, but just the fact that they were aware, they were a witness to their quality of awareness to what these predators are doing, they consider dangerous enough to target you, even if you're a nobody. So that's how I feel that it's the quality of someone's awareness that seems to be put us on a radar for these predators,
And these predators, rather they're being motivated by some deep subconscious disconnect from reality, and they're on this warring path to lose our energy, whatever it is, or they're being guided by some other force, non-human force or whatever. I feel like, and then mother ADHD part of my mind is like, what about the AI, transhumanism, artificial intelligence, the soul, kind of like Nigel Kerner talks about. And then I start thinking about the ones who run this country, the elites, the the rulers of the domain, lack of a better term, um, they push this fear and propaganda upon us, and they keep us in a constant state of fear and survival mode.
Mhm.
I think that they're afraid of our truest and highest potential, you know, and maybe they want to keep us in this fear and survival mode all the time. With rather what happened in 2020, 9/11, what happened July 13th with Trump. Um, Maybe there's something with the fear, I mentioned this a few other times with certain guests when I really want to get their take. So let's use the Wi-Fi and computer metaphor. I would say our brain is like a hard drive, and our pineal gland acts like the transmitter that can pick up these Wi-Fi signals, such as a computer. Our soul could act in similar ways that a Wi-Fi signal does to all computer-related devices. Maybe when we are in the womb of a pregnant woman, our mother, possibly in the developmental phase of that fetus, maybe that woman's pineal gland picks up and transmits an incoming Wi-Fi signal, aka the soul, and somehow it transmits that signal to the child. And could that be a reason why they are keeping us in a perpetual state of fear, anxiety, survival mode, so that they can almost hack the incoming child, the incoming soul, the incoming energy, aka Wi-Fi signal before it becomes implanted into the baby, you know?
Yeah, I mean, what we're learning, I mean, I'm learning from the perspective of people who work with cult abuse and ritual abuse survivors, where they are chosen before they're born, like conception rituals or preconception or in the womb, and then different recovery uh, experiences they have of their, like where they remember when they were in the womb, or they're getting visions of what happened before they came in incarnation, and how they were snatched by a dark being that was working through the family line from occult rituals. So a lot of people, I think, can be, targeted before birth and in the womb for sure, to be conditioned to have a certain state of consciousness or even control through those kinds of beings. So I would say, so that's definitely true. I mean, you could feel it. A lot of people who go through like getting rid of phobias or whatever it is, or certain traumas, can go back and find out it could have been their mom was traumatized in the womb when they were in a war-torn country, escaping, during when they were pregnant, and having that anxiety, or if they knew that they weren't wanted, having, great feelings of rejection. So definitely those things come through in the womb. We know that. But what was interesting, I thought, is that this woman actually had unique characteristics that is not common actually for a lot of the abductees. I've only remember a few cases where they were actually able to arise with their natural instinct and bypass the manipulation of perception. And like a natural instinct to a predatorial thing that intruding is like fighting and defending. And then that's actually an appropriate response in some cases. But some people, it's like they switch them off where they'll cause you to become paralyzed. But if I remember correctly, I mentioned this before, in the KT Frankovich Lime Grove encounters experiences, probably back in the 90s, where she had encounters with a different type of alien. It was actually a somewhat like a gray, but different. It was more muscular, and it had 6 fingers. I don't know if it had 6 toes, but it was kind of like floating, running. And its normal ability would be to telepathically kind of subconsciously manipulate your perception so you don't notice them and what they're doing and what they're going to do, basically. But she just noticed it right away and didn't respond in the normal ways of perception manipulation, which means she's a unique person who has a unique perception and ability to not be manipulated maybe in the same ways. So that's actually a unique quality to have, because one of the things that Dr. Corrado Malanga, and he's not really well understood in the American abduction research community, but he always said that the will of the soul is compromised, or they can manipulate our will and our perception so that the will of our natural instincts is dulled down. So this is where I still think the counterfeit spirit comes in. And if we know what the real is and what the counterfeit is, the real is going to say no and want to set a boundary, basically. But if that perception is not perceived or discerned, then it's easy for them to just come and infiltrate and manipulate until, they copy out your memory and your identity, and then you become, one of their helpers. And some people are actually used in abductions to help abduct others and to pacify others, because I know I've heard this before. So
Oh, absolutely. Remember that guy, Joseph, that I had a confrontation with because he was getting on my nerves in our support group meetings way back when. He said that in the first meeting he had, the first support group meeting he attended, Howard, our old friend Howard, showed up a little late, right? And the Joseph guy, his jaw dropped because he'd seen Howard before, and in the context of an abduction experience where Howard walked into the operating theater where the ETs were working on this Joseph guy, and Howard was holding a tray of instruments, right? Now Howard, if you remember, he was anti, alien, anti, deep black military because of all of the mind control and abuse he was subjected to back in the day, as anybody. But it just shows that even someone with a conscious persona of being anti, abuse, anti-abuse from any quarter, human or alien, right? How they could subvert his will and use him essentially as a as an aide or as an intern almost, in this alien abduction medical procedure. And Joseph said, "Well, I've seen that guy before. He was holding a tray for these aliens," and people will get the wrong impression. Oh, yeah, I had an experience and this guy was working for the aliens, he's evil, and now he's doing podcasts. No, that doesn't mean that he's evil or she's evil. It means that they were momentarily subverted and used against their will to do something that they normally wouldn't do, right? Now, there are some people that willingly will work for the aliens, like this Joseph guy, right? And that's a whole nother story.
You go and make them feel important, and there's just all that kind of stuff. It's so much manipulation through mind control. But then they could fake someone's image. If you're not aware, they can use someone else's image and make you think it's someone else. So you always have to go deeper and not assume everything until you really go deep in your own investigation. It's just, I wish it was more cut and dry and easy, but it's not. And it kind of concerns me how easy the mass public can be manipulated to have black and white or the multiple choice answer quote question of derivations of what they think something is based on what they're being told and manipulated to believe. So it always goes back to, how do we go back to an original perception of original truth that hasn't been infected or polluted by the counterfeit, that's always trying to come in and just tweak things a little bit and change things and corrupt things until you start normalizing that which is corrupt. And that happens behaviorally in multi-generational abuse. I mean, we see that all the time with narcissistic abuse, war-torn families, certain cultures, alcoholism, incest, whatever it is. There's certain behaviors that just normalize, and you just don't know any different until you get out of that conditioning or out of those relationships to find out what's truly healthy and good, and then get out of that. So, and that's how I think they breed the love out of us. I think there's something more to just behavioral conditioning, though. I think there's something more, and this goes into it's kind of creepy. This was mentioned on his name is Mac Azura. I think that's the name he's using on a Michael Salla interview with an abductee recently, who talked about experiences with the bat-winged reptilian types that are kind of like a Mothman, but Draco reptilian, that quality, and really scary, malevolent Draco reptilian things. And he might have had the Greys too, but he had a twin brother, and him and his twin brother were having experiences. So long story short, he does a bunch of regressions to find out what's going on, because it was very, very stressful. And they found out that, I guess, the alien Greys were doing a type of soul scalping procedure where they're literally pulling out soul essence of people and then storing it in these like glass jars or something on a craft or whatever, wherever they're storing it. So they're storing soul pieces and fragments of other abductees, and then using those soul fragment consciousness fragments to put in the hybrids so that they have a soul. So they build their souls through thefted soul fragments of other abductees. So this brought me to like, oh, wow, this is very similar For example, this is why like a mother who's have a hybrid child, let's say, and maybe that hybrid child, the reason why the bond is strong, maybe it's they took your part of your soul and put it in the child, and then of course you feel this love connection. So this can also be where if you get soul fragments from someone else, and I believe this happens, and this creates confusion for alleged past life memories, believe it or not. And this is what Malanga brought up, but people aren't getting it because they're thinking, well, that I was a Draco in my past life, or I was this alien, or I was that alien. I have all these memories, but it could be that you're getting soul fragments of other people who might have, that being could have been hosting, right? Because they thefted their soul fragments, and then you get the memories of that being who had that soul fragment, or you have the soul fragment memories that you actually think are your own. So it could create confusion in identity. But to bring this back to something else I heard that was similar, and this has to do with some of Amanda Baez's work with ritual abuse survivors, satanic ritual abuse, and Luciferian families, like family systems, and how they would use something called the blue dust or the blue soul dust. And it's like, I don't know if it's the original dust light of the person, like a soul light quality or whatever, or if it's the Luciferian shrouded soul essence that they could shatter and then put in many different dimensions or people, so that you can have like a soul twin soul, what do you call it? Twinning with another person, or you can be able to go in all these different dimensional realities and portals, because a part of that blue dust that belongs to you is in all these different locations or people. And then you have connections with all these different people who actually have your soul shards and fragments in this dust. So it's something similar that I think that they can do by manipulating the soul fragments or the dust in some way, that they can create these connections and maybe even false memories to a certain degree. So that's where, like, well, how do we know? Because like this man who was on Sala's show, I remembered what came up in the regression was basically being a past life as a reptilian, if I remember correctly. And that part of the activities was to vampirize off other people, like taking their soul and then accruing all this soul essence energy through vampirization, whatever they're doing, and then trying to take that soul for themselves so they evolve and build and develop a soul. I'm like, that doesn't sound right to me. It sounds like, well, they're just soul thefting, but they're getting the memories and identities of the soul parts they took. And then if that entity was connected to him, he might have the memories of the entity and the soul shards that he took from others, and then take that on. Oh, well, that was me in a past life. That may not be true. It actually might be the entity that was messing with him through his bloodline, was like what we call the active alien memory that's inserted in the consciousness of an abductee, according to Dr. Corrado Malanga's understanding. And then that we actually have those memories because that's inside of our brain or consciousness, until you switch it off and you make it passive, so that it's no longer vivified by our life force of our eternal spirit. So that whole idea for recovery from this abduction phenomena was to switch off their memory or their fragment of consciousness that's embedded in us, so that it can't work its will through us or use us as a puppet to vivify their consciousness and their identity. So we just switch it off and disconnect them from our eternal soul, and it stays passive. So that's basically what you would want to do, instead of what I think is happening, and we mentioned this before the show, is there's a lot of identity issues and illusions, or perhaps misperceptions, that might happen with abductees or MILABs because of taking on alien identities. Or this is my galactic family, I'm really this alien, or I remember being this or that. But we don't really know if this is a fragment of consciousness that's taken from another being that's attaching itself to us. So I think those things could be happening, and we don't know until we really reconnect and restore any dissociation parts which happen through trauma, you know?
There's a couple of parallel aspects to that. If you look at it from the organ transplant, blood transfusion aspect, people have reported once they've taken on someone else's blood, someone else's organs, they begin to have spontaneous memories of what
Yes.
that person experienced. And then if you look at the Mia Adams, the X Cycles author, you remember her story,
Yes. I love
where
my book.
she was in the You Love Bite book, and correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm explaining this correctly. They took the mitochondrial DNA from another woman and put it in her ovum, or it was the other way around. But at
They
any
took her
rate,
egg. Yeah, they
go
took
ahead.
her egg. It contains basically they took her egg, they harvested her egg, and it was actually military who helped do this back in, I don't know, in the 50s or the early 60s, whenever it was. And then once they harvested the egg, then what they can do is take out the well, it hadn't been haven't been, they just put DNA of two other parents from a conception into the eggs because the egg creates the body. So they just basically substituted the autosomal parents and then kept the original genetic mitochondrial DNA from the ovum, which is the original mother, because they didn't use her autosomal DNA, just the mitochondrial DNA. So basically, this hybrid abductee, who was the FBI agent in the Love Bite setup, right? He had three parents: the autosomal parents from the in vitro fertilization of her egg, and then she was the mitochondrial donor. So she was the mitochondrial mother, and then he had two other parents. But the study of the aliens supposedly was to study the non-tangible energetic connections between people to see what how strong a bond is with let's just say just with the mitochondrial DNA. So you actually so there was a strong connection. I mean, it was a love bite for crying
Was a
out
love
loud.
bite. And so, if I remember the story correctly, naval intelligence, an element of naval intelligence that was observing this, and they may have had a hand in what you just described, they were appalled at the prospect of her having an intimate relationship with this guy, this FBI agent, who really, in the overall scheme of things, you zoom out, was her son, essentially, right? And so they didn't want this kind of incestuous relationship to happen between Mia and this FBI agent she was bonded with in this alien love bite setup. It was an interesting story, but to your point, it's an example of how the information field, as David Icke would call it, right? Drawing, whether it's from an organ transplant, a blood transfusion, genetic manipulation, like you were talking about, how that can have an influence on our emotions, our memories, and our behaviors. And I'm also
Yes.
reminded of Kenneth Grant's book. He was a devotee of Crowley's.
Crowley. Yeah, I
Yeah,
remember
and
I wrote a
he
letter to him one time.
and
And he was really
I think he sent you back a nastygram or something, didn't he?
good because I wanted him to comment on the love bite because it had to do with love obsessions that resulted from something that was really a magical operation, which it is. It's just that it's done in a different way with aliens, and I don't think any magician would want to admit to the nefariousness of really what they're doing,
Yeah.
basically.
When Crowley himself said that he was in contact with aliens, right? And the purpose, I don't want to go off on a tangent, but the purpose, creating the circle or the pentagram to stand within, it's an outward metaphor, a manifestation of being earthbound, uh, an ensouled individual, an adept, a warlock, a magus, connecting with the cosmos, the multiverse, right? So there's even an ET component, right? And one could argue, and we've had discussions. I remember in the old days, Tal Levesque used to talk about how Enochian was the language of the Greys, which wouldn't surprise me, right? But anyway, getting back to Kenneth Grant, in his books, he talked about how when the Kundalini was activated in the Scarlet Women, they would place these coin-shaped metallic objects along the chakra point. And then when the
Really?
Kundalini was activated, these coins would absorb what he called ohas, this kind of
Okay.
energetic Kundalini essence, which could be stored and used later for whatever purposes, right? So the point of relevance is it's yet another example of how, the human body can be activated or triggered in such a way that an energetic essence of the person being triggered can be absorbed by an adept and either used at that moment. And we see this all the time with reptilian rapes, for example, where the reptilian would rape the woman, and in many instances, not always, but in some instances, engender a strong Kundalini, orgasmic effect, right? Well, in these rituals that Kenneth Grant was talking about, they would induce this Kundalini rising in the Scarlet Woman, and then they would place these coins, metallic coin-looking things, along the chakra points, and the coins would absorb what he called the ohas to be used, later. They would be stored essentially, like a battery, right? So, all that is relevant to what you're talking about. I guess there's different ways of doing the same thing. So, the danger that I see is over identification with something, right?
Yes.
Like, for example, we see this a lot with the alien love bite setup. Well, I've got a past life thing with him, and we got to work things through. Well, who says? Even if they really had a past life thing with him, and if you peel back all the layers and you get really deep into past life regression, and it was a toxic, dysfunctional relationship, why would you want to spend another lifetime going through that? That doesn't even make sense. Like, ooh, I remember you from a past life. Piss off, pal. You know what I mean? That would be my reaction, right? But
Yeah.
for others, it's like, well, we gotta work things out. Well, what's the genesis of that motivation? Is it really the individual who's saying, no, we've got to work this through and figure out all these karmic issues and resolve them? Or is there something working through that, in our example, a woman, let's say, working through her in order to form that enmeshment with the other love bite partner to keep the whole cycle going, right?